industrial base. Make no mistake, we are not simply planning to order up reports. We are going to be taking actions to close gaps as we identify them, just as we have been working with industry in recent weeks to ensure that U.S. automobile manufacturers have the parts they need to keep making cars here in America. But we expect that by taking this type of comprehensive approach to supply chain resilience, we'll be able to strengthen our supply chains for the long term. And with that, I'm happy to turn this over to my friend and colleague, Sameera.
Thank you, Peter. Creating more resilient supply chains is an opportunity for our country to come together to create well-paying jobs for workers across our country. That is why today's action reinforces the President's overarching commitment to help our country build back better. We know that even before the COVID crisis, the economy was not working for most Americans. Worker pay was too low. Many families could not make ends meet. Many of the jobs that served as the heart of the middle class had been lost due to changes in both technology and the structure of the global economy. Disruption is inevitable, but over the past few years, we have moved from crisis to crisis when some essential product was suddenly in short supply. What we need is the capacity to respond quickly when hit by a challenge. This executive order moves the whole government towards being more prepared. These sector-specific reviews that the President orders today, we're going to be asking agencies to do the following. They're going to review risks in supply chains and in our domestic industrial base. They're going to think broadly about risk. There's climate risk and geopolitical risk, but there's also risk in not having enough workers ready to meet the needs of that sector, or enough factories or the right equipment to make a good or retool a shift to a new spike in demand for an essential good. They're going to be recommending actions to improve resiliency. In some instances, that action might be the data that government can publish, and so the private sector can plan and mobilize and take action. But in other instances, we have levers like procurement authority that we can use to support stockpiling or support some level of domestic production. We are also going to be looking for opportunities to work with Congress to give us more tools so that we can improve our preparedness. And today's conversation with members of Congress is going to be part of an ongoing conversation we've been having with them on this. Finally, a big part of this executive order is consultation with stakeholders and experts. We are going to be reaching out to talk to the American people. Government action alone will not solve complex supply chain challenges. This is going to be broad engagement, broad conversations that will include business, labor, local communities, academia. This work is going to require a new commitment to public-private partnerships, and we need all voices at that table to help us design those partnerships. This is a real opportunity to invest in the future of America and build on our nation's strengths. There are opportunities for small business development to help diversify supplier networks and alleviate the risk of too big to fail companies in the supply chains for critical goods. There are opportunities to improve worker readiness and training so they have the skills needed to ramp up research, production, or distribution of a critical good. And there are opportunities to bring more jobs to communities around the country, including communities of color, to leverage the ingenuity and grit of the American people. This is going to leverage U.S. scientific leadership. It's going to further advance our research and development prowess. It will do so while also recognizing that our ability to maintain our innovative edge in research requires us to invest in both research and manufacturing in communities across America. Because when you pair thinkers and doers, that's how you create the technologies and products that help us tackle tomorrow's challenges. I want to reiterate what my colleagues have said. This work is not going to be about America going it alone. The answer to these weaknesses is not always to ramp up domestic production. We know these vulnerabilities affect not just American households. It's a global problem in some of these supply chains. We are committed to working with partners and allies to reduce these vulnerabilities that are affecting all of us. The work ahead builds upon America's historic legacy of making strategic investments in our future that lay the foundation for broad-based economic growth. Smart investments in research, manufacturing, domestic capacity, and our workforce has in the past unleashed decades of economic expansion, and an expansion that raised wages and living standards for American families across the country. We can and should build upon that legacy, and that is how we will approach this supply chain work. This problem was decades in the making. We can solve it by making smart investments that are long-term in nature, that reach families and workers in all of America. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if we can take some questions. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Presidents for decades have been promising to create factory jobs. We've got about 12.2 million factory jobs. That's down from 17 million in 2000. How many jobs do you think this initiative can create? And what are your metrics of success?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. I think we think it's important to have a broad lens and broad view on how you measure the jobs and the job creation in the manufacturing space, because manufacturing is doesn't just support and create jobs in the manufacturing sector. There are broad spillover effects that it has. There are going to be R&D jobs here, research jobs here. There's going to be jobs in the kind of supplier networks in the services industry. So I think we have to start tracking and understanding that manufacturing's contributions to our economy can't just be narrowly counted in that way. That's what I would suggest.
Jennifer?
When you talk about incentivizing and funding, on the budget the upcoming budget, do you think that you will propose some sort of federal funding to help increase the supply of semiconductors?
We are still in the process of formulating the budget, so at this time, I'm not able to talk in specifics about the budget proposal, but what I would say is we are looking forward to talking with members of Congress about what more we can do in partnership with them to give us the funds we need.
And
Can I add on that? Just like to step back for a moment. Obviously, we're talking about multiple different supply chains here, and I think that the solutions we will be proposing and implementing will vary a little